The laws before Sinai. The laws of Noah is a common term for laws given before Israel stood at the foot of Mount Sinai. There are 7 categories of laws that we can expound upon if we dig deeper. There are also commands that were given that do not apply to us today, such as the command not to eat from the tree of life because we do not have access to it, and no command to build an ark. I will show the laws given before Sinai with verses. No speculation. No rabbi made these laws up, and they are still binding today because there is no ritual laws associated with them that required a temple or a sacrifice or a priest for Gentiles to observe. To the Jew first. I'm going to show why this is not an accurate depiction of righteousness concerning the Jew first and then to the Greek. The law of Moses was not given in the beginning of the Torah, and I'm going to demonstrate that Noah and his descendants were first given a Torah and a covenant, and the concept of salvation coming to the Jews and coming to then the nations is actually backwards. It didn't happen like that. So Romans 10:12. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich to all who call upon him. This is true in the sense of God does listen to Jew and Gentile, but this did not come to the Jews first. Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed of the glad tidings, for it is God's power to salvation to everyone that believes, both to Jews first and to Greek. See, that's not true. Romans 2:10. But glory, honor, and peace to everyone who works what is good, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Not true. The superiority of the Jew is not what you think. Most of the time, this phrase is thrown at people, and it is basically used to belittle other people or other nations and nationalities or even religions. So let's look at it. In the Darby translation, Romans 3:1-2, what then the superiority of the Jew? Or what the profit of circumcision? Much every way. And first, indeed, to them were entrusted the oracles of God. Yes, the Israelites were entrusted with the Torah, but if you look in the 21st century King James Version, it says, what advantage then have the Jew? Or what profit is there in circumcision? Well, we see this word superiority in the Greek, parison, can be translated both ways. So what advantage is there is because, for one, if you have a company, you have to pick a CEO, you have to pick a manager, you have to pick a supervisor. Everybody can't be the manager, everybody can't be the supervisor, everyone can't be the CEO. Someone has to run the show, but they have to run it correctly. And we see, even though Israel was called the chosen people, they failed in this mission due to wanting to be like the other nations and pick up the things that they weren't supposed to be doing. So we see in Deuteronomy 9:4, do not think in your heart after the Lord your God has cast them out before you, saying, because of my righteousness the Lord has brought me in to possess this land. But it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out from before you. So it's not that Israel was holier than thou. It is because those other nations were wicked and were kicked out. And we see a theme. Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. These nations were kicked out of Israel. And then Israel, the nation, was kicked out of their own land because of their sins. So everyone gets the same type of punishment if you don't obey the Most High. So even though Israel does has its advantages of being a chosen nation, they still are subject to the same rules and regulations concerning the laws of the land. Although, we know there's 613 laws that Israel has to keep that the other nations do not, they still have a set of rules that they have to adhere to. They would deliver only themselves by their righteousness. Ezekiel 14:14. Even if these 3 men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they would deliver only themselves by their righteousness, says the Lord God. So we see Noah, a Gentile, not a Jew. We see Daniel was a Jew or Israelite in exile. So that means he was subject to the Babylonian kingdom because his nation, the chosen people Israel, were kicked out of the land for disobedience. And we see Job, a Gentile. These people would deliver themselves by their righteousness. So we see there is no real advantage as far as superiority in the fact that just because they're Israelites, they're above and beyond. No, Noah was saved also. Daniel was saved, and Job was exonerated and given all his things back when he passed the test. So we see two Gentiles mentioned in this verse, and we know that if you're going to play the game of God does not like the Gentiles, they probably never read this verse. Anybody who's preaching that to you. The chosen nation could not do whatever they wanted. Numbers 22:4. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, this whore will now lick up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field. So the Moabites were afraid that when Israel came up out of Egypt, that they would come and start to take over everything. But they didn't know the Torah, and they were not aware of Deuteronomy 2:9. And the Lord said unto me, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee of their land for possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for possession. So had the king of Moab known that Israel was not allowed to come and harass them or fight with them, he wouldn't have tried to get Balaam to curse them. Maybe he would have anyway, but not according to what's going on, that he's afraid that they're going to lick up all the land that is around us as the ox licks up the grass of the field. Same situation with Esau, Deuteronomy 2:5. Do not contend with them, for I will not give you any of their land, no, not so much as for the sole of the foot to tread on, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. So even though Israel was chosen, they could not just go around and do what they wanted and take whatever land that they wanted. That's not how it worked. Being chosen is conditional, Deuteronomy 7:6. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples on the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 28:15. But it shall come to pass, if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. So, even though Israel was the chosen nation, they still had to basically stay in line or lose that position. It wasn't just an unconditional thing to where you're the chosen people, do what you want, and I'm going to back you up. No, that's not how it worked at all. So when people try to throw that in your face, we're the chosen nation, we're Israelites. Okay, you might be an Israelite, but why did you get kicked out of the land? Why did the Romans get to destroy the temple? Why did the Babylonians get to destroy your temple? Because you wasn't listening. So although you was chosen, you didn't choose the Most High at that time. So, you got to be able to know these verses in order to basically throw it back in their face, because it's wrong for people to wield the chosen people sword, not knowing that Israel was chosen, but they couldn't do whatever they wanted to. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria. This is an interesting story. 2 Kings 5:13-14. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? Then he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So we see a Syrian who was a leper comes to the prophet, asks him what he needs to do to be healed, and he's healed. He's not told he has to convert. He's not told he has to be baptized. He just basically told him to go wash in the water. The prophet didn't even come out to him. So when people say, the Gentiles can only be saved or healed or anything through the New Testament, That's not how the Tanakh teaches it. Mark 1 and 40, and there came a leper to him, beseeching him and kneeling down to him and saying to him, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. Matthew 15 and 24. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So we see when Jesus is dealing with non-Jews, he has a different approach than when he's dealing with regular Israelites. We see in Mark 1:40, it just says a leper came to him. You would assume he was a Jew, because when the woman came to him and she wanted him to heal her daughter, he says, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, that's not the approach that the prophet told Naaman. Naaman was clearly somebody who was from the Syrian Empire, and he came and wanted to be healed, and the prophet told him, go dip yourself in the water and you'll be clean. Nothing about, oh, you're not an Israelite, you don't believe, none of these things. So we see the proper treatment of Gentiles by Israelites. You're not supposed to be mean to the strangers, period. So we see that's not the approach that Jesus gave the woman. He even ended up calling her a dog, so when you read the rest of the story. Jesus calls Gentiles dogs. Mark 7 and 26. The woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. So what happened? Matthew 15:26. But he answered and said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. So we see a woman coming to ask the Messiah, Jesus, or God to some Christians, to help her, and he calls her a dog. We know this is an insult. Philippians 3 and 2 says, beware of dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the mutilation. So we see evil workers and dogs is basically you're insulting somebody, you're calling them a bad person. Now, why he throws in the mutilation is because, Paul is against circumcision. He even said he wished that the knife would slip and you cut your member off. Why he would say such a thing about a covenant that God made with Abraham, that's for another topic. But Revelation 22 and 15. But outside are dogs and sorcerers and sexual immoral and murderers and idolaters and whoever loves and practices a lie. So we see dogs are put in the same category of all these things that are sins. So for him to say it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs, it's pretty low. Matthew 10 and 5. These 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the Gentiles and do not enter a city of the Samaritans. So we know the gospel, it changes depending on which book you're reading. So first is don't go to the Gentiles, and then at the end of the book, go your way to all the nations and teach them about the Holy Ghost and the baptisms and stuff. But when he first started preaching, he said, do not go into the way of the Gentiles. Why not? What's wrong with the Gentiles? We know that the New Testament has a very inconsistent theme. First it's don't go to the Gentiles, and it's all nations are going to be saved. The model prayer in Matthew chapter 6 is pray to God, ask him for everything. This is the manner in which you should pray. No mention of how to get salvation through Jesus in the model prayer. It's all about talking to God, asking for him to forgive you and all these things. But then later on is that you got to drink blood and, pray in my name, ask things in my name, John 14:14. So we see the theme of the New Testament completely is it's a roller coaster. It goes all over the place. I will make a difference between my people and your people. So there is a difference between Israel and the rest of the nations, but not how people paint it. Exodus 8:23. I will make a difference between my people and your people. Tomorrow, this sign shall be. So what's going on? Exodus 9 and 4. And the Lord will make a difference between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt. So nothing shall die of all the things, of all that belongs to the children of Israel. So the distinction was, since Pharaoh don't want to let my people go, I'm going to kill all your animals, and I'm going to show you that the Israelites' animals don't die. to let you know I'm God, I control everything, I decide who lives and who dies. So that's the distinction made in this particular instance. The Lord does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. Exodus 9:20-21. He who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his livestock flee to the houses. But he who did not regard the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field. So we see the people who actually listened, their animals and their people didn't suffer the consequences to those who didn't. And these were not even Israelites, because it says they were the servants of Pharaoh. Exodus 11:7. But against none of the children of Israel shall a dog move its tongue against man or beast, that you may know that the Lord does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. So although there is a distinction, when the Gentiles listen to the Most High, they get the same advantages or blessings that Israel gets. Clearly in the text concerning the plagues, right? So what's going to be the next thing spoken about? The firstborn of the Egyptians that were killed, right? So why did God kill the firstborn of the Egyptians? If he doesn't have a problem with the Gentiles, why did all the Egyptian firstborn have to die? Well, this is a result of rebellion. It says, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. So the Egyptians were warned that if you don't let my son go, I'm going to kill your firstborn. Now, let's delve into this a little bit. Exodus 11:5. And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sitteth upon a throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant who was behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts. Why is this? Another reason. Exodus 1:16. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the birth stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. Now, what does the Torah say about such things? Deuteronomy 19:19. Then you shall do unto him as he thought to have done unto his brother, so thou shalt put away the evil from among you. So when you go and trying to get something done to somebody who is innocent, it's going to come back on your own head. The difference is the Most High gave them a way out. Even though they were killing all the Hebrew babies, he says, I'm only going to kill yours if you don't let mine go. He could have just said, because you killed my sons, I'm going to kill all your sons. Nope. So then people will say, well, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Well, guess what? He asked Pharaoh to let him go 5 or 6 times before he hardened his heart. So actually, Pharaoh got his heart hardened out of rebellion. He didn't just harden his heart out the gate. He asked and he asked and he asked. Then he gave him a situation to where now I'm not even going to let you make the decision no more. I'm going to harden your heart. Because when I asked you, when I gave you your own free will, you didn't want to do it. So now there's a consequence. So this is what happens when you deal with people who want to find holes and poke holes in the Torah, but they don't read it thoroughly. A people dwelling alone. 2 Kings 19:15. Then Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord God of Israel, the one who dwells between the cherubim, you are God, you alone. Of all kingdoms of the earth, you have made heaven and earth. Now, the one who dwells between the cherubs, you are God, you alone. So the word holy means separated. So Hezekiah is telling you that the Most High is separated. You who dwell between the cherubim, you are God, you alone, right? So if Israel is supposed to be like the Most High, they're supposed to be holy. This is why they are people who dwell alone. Numbers 23:9. For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him there, a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Numbers 6:2. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman consecrates an offering to make the vow of a Nazarite, to separate himself to the Lord. So there's even a situation of something you can do to dedicate yourself to where you separate yourself to the Most High even further, although you're already Israelite. It's like getting a little bit just that much closer to the Most High because you abstain from things. This is when you grow your hair and abstain from wine and grapes and things like that. So we see the Most High is alone. He's the only God. Israel is a people who dwell alone. So that's why they were given their own nation, their own laws and customs to be a light to the Gentiles. So when it says a people dwelling alone, this is why Israel is not to mix and mingle with the other nations. It's not about being better. It's about separating yourself so people can see how you get down. And if they want to join, they can join. This is all about free will. You sons of Levi. So even amongst the chosen people, you have chosen tribes. So even amongst the Israelites, we know that Judah and Levi were also separated within the Israelites. We see the tribe of Judah is where the kings are from. Originally, they were from Benjamin, but it was transferred to Judah. And then we see the Levites are the ones who bear the ark and do all the temple services. So even amongst the Israelites, you have a chosen tribe to do a specific job. Again, it's about the job. It's not that the Levites were better than anybody else. They were chosen for a specific job. Now, there was reasons that they were chosen, but that's not the topic of this conversation. So let's deal with it. Number 16, 6-9. Do this, take censers, Korah, and all your company. Put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow, and it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourself, you sons of Levi. So in this instance, Korah, who is a Levite, wanted to do all the things that the other Levites do, mainly the sons of Aaron, who were the priests who actually served in the tent of meeting. Now, Korah's family had a job as well, but he wanted it all, right? Then Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing that is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you or made you holy from among the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord and to stand before the congregation to serve him? So he's saying you're already a Levite, you already get to serve, but now you want to do what Aaron and his sons do. This is the whole situation of take the censers, put fire in it, when Aaron's rod budded with the almonds and stuff like that. So Levi had a distinction between just Levites, and then you had the sons of Aaron who had a whole nother job to do. So there's ranks, okay? So even within Israel, you had other chosen Israelites for specific jobs. Are you seeking the priesthood also? Exodus 29:9. And you shall gird them with girdles, Aaron and his sons, and put the bonnets on them, and the priest's office shall be theirs for a perpetual statute. And you shall consecrate Aaron and his sons. So we see Aaron was a Levite, but him and his sons were consecrated, and they were actually messiahs as well. When you read Exodus 28:41, it tells you, make Aaron and his sons messiah. So when Israel got their first messiah, they got a whole bunch at the same time. Numbers 16:10. And that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi with you. And are you seeking the priesthood also? What's interesting is that word for priesthood is kahuna. Like the Hawaiians say, the big kahuna, right? Kind of interesting how they got that same word for priesthood. Kahuna, 3550 on the Strongs. Now that I've shown how, although Israel is called the chosen nation, within the chosen nation, there are chosen tribes. So people just got to get out their feelings and accept that there's ranks in the world. I mean, even within African tribes, you got to have a leader. You got to pick somebody to run the show. So every company has to pick somebody to run the show. Governments have to put people in charge. Militaries have to put people in charge. So why wouldn't a planet have to put someone in charge if they're capable for the job? Now, we know Israel had their righteous times and their wicked times. So we know nobody's perfect. We make mistakes. And, this is all part of prophecy as well. So it's not about being better than someone. It's people get picked for certain positions, and sometimes they do good and sometimes they don't. So with that being said, what is a Gentile? So this word can be taken as a derogatory word and offensive to some people who are ignorant of the usage. Now, some people do use it to offend people. Like people use the context of we're the chosen people to offend people because some people some people are mean and some people are ignorant of what they're even talking about. So Strong's Exhaustive Concordance 1471, the word goy, Gentile, heathen, nation, people. In the sense of massing, meaning like a lot of something. Foreign nation, hence a Gentile, a troop of animals, or a flight of locusts. Gentile, heathen, nation, people. So when people see a troop of animals, so you're calling this a troop of animals? Well, guess what? Israel itself is also called a goy. And I'm going to show you that. So in context, it's just talking about a bunch of something, just like a nation is a bunch of people, right? A flight of locusts. Is people calling you locusts when they're calling you a Gentile or using that word? No, it just means a massing of something, a bunch of something. It's a very generic term, and I'm going to show you Israel is called goys. So, people need to get out their feelings. Nations, or goyim, plural, right? Genesis 10:32. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations, in their nations, in their goyim. And by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So, everybody who was a descendant of Noah is a goy. All right? Genesis 14:1. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, and Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, king of goyim, right? Genesis 12:2. And I will make you a great goyim, a great nation, right? A great goy, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. So he just told Abraham, I'm going to make you a great goy. Exodus 19:6. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy goy, a holy nation, which means holy doesn't mean better, it means separate, a separate nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. So in context, we see Tidal was the king of the goyim, right? We know the first king after the flood was Nimrod, and he was a descendant of the Cushites. So the first kings were Israelites. Were not Israelites. So I know there's people who want to say, the Bible's racist. Well, the first king in the Tanakh is Nimrod, who was a Cushite. So it's interesting the amount of lies that are just told in order to prove false points. So we see Abraham is called his people are called goy as well. So this is not a derogatory term. Father of many goyim, father of many nations. Genesis 17:4. As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many goyim. Genesis 17:20. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great goy. So we see Abraham was told that his people would be called a great goy, or a great nation. And same as Ishmael, I will make him a great goy. No distinction. So if you want to say, oh, that word means animals, it means this, it means that, well, guess what? Israelites got the same terminology put on them too. All the goyim of the earth shall be blessed in him. All the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. It don't say except the Greeks. It don't say except for the Romans. It don't say except for white people. It don't say except for the Chinese or the Africans. All the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Genesis 18:18. Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty goy, and all the goyim of the earth shall be blessed in him. Genesis 20:4. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will you slay also a righteous goy? So we see that the goy can be righteous too, clearly in the text. Genesis 25:23. And the Lord said to her, two goyim are in your womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from your bowels. and the one shall be stronger than the other people, and the other elder shall serve the younger. So even Jacob and Esau are called goy. So let's stop the lies and the misinformation concerning this word. Now here's another verse that is completely taken out of context. All nations before him are as nothing. Now notice it says all nations, right? Isaiah 40:15-17. Behold, the nations are as a drop in a bucket, and are counted as a small dust on the scales. Look, he lifts up the isles as a very little thing, and Lebanon is not sufficient to burn. Where is Lebanon? Nor its beast sufficient for a burnt offering. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted by him less than nothing and worthless. So, in the same chapter, let's see what's going on here. Isaiah 40:6-7. The voice said, cry out. He said, what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its loveliness is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, because the breath of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. So in context, everybody really ain't nothing but a drop of water compared to the Most High, as far as you want to put everything next to him on the scale, right? Because it says, behold, the nations are a drop in a bucket and are counted as a small dust on the scales, right? When you comparing yourself to the Most High, all nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted by him less than nothing and worthless. It says all nations. It says all flesh is grass. It doesn't say except for the Israelites. Isaiah 41:14. Fear not, you worm Jacob, you men of Israel. I will help you, says the Lord and your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. So Israel is called a worm here. Fear not, you worm Jacob. What is a worm? A very insignificant thing on the scale. Now we know worms got their jobs. They break up the soil. We need worms, right? But it's basically telling you, don't think too much of yourself. Even David calls himself a worm. The king of Israel, of the chosen nation, says, I am a worm. Read the Psalms. So when people try to throw this in your face, oh, God says you're just a drop in the bucket. It says all nations, all flesh is grass. So you can make anything say anything when you want to read it out of context. So I think the biggest problem is people look for things, and what they find can be used as an insult, but then when you go into it, it just makes them really kind of look stupid. So with that being said, let's move on. Before Sinai, Genesis 4:4, Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering. So was Abel an Israelite? No. But it said the Most High respected Abel and his offering. Genesis 5:24. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Was Enoch an Israelite? Nope. But the Most High still took him. Genesis 6:8-9. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Was Noah an Israelite? Nope. But we know Noah was saved from a flood. He was still righteous. He was called perfect in his generation. So he was doing something right in the eyes of the Most High. So stop letting people convince you that Israel is superior and special in the sense of that, you know what, don't stink. Because prior to the Torah, you had a lot of righteous people. And without Noah, none of us would probably be here right now. So let's just stop the nonsense. A righteous nation, a righteous goy. Genesis 20:4. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will you slay a righteous goy also? So how did the goy get righteous? They must have had some type of standards, right? Job 1:1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. Now, if I didn't put that name Job there, and people were ignorant of the Bible, people would assume that that's talking about Jesus. blameless and upright, fear God and shun evil, right? But nope, this is a goy named Job. Jonah 3:9-10. Who can tell if God will turn and relent and turn away from his fierce anger so that we may not perish? Then God saw their works and that they turned from their evil way, and God relented from the disaster that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. Now, these were Gentiles. This was not Israelites. These were from the people of Nineveh. So we see, even though they had a punishment coming to them because they were being wicked, Jonah comes to them, tells them to repent. They do it. The Most High did not do it. So these goy were saved without a Messiah, without blood, without sacrifice, without a high priest. How is this possible? Read Jonah chapter 3. They fasted, they repented, and it says God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way. Right? This is how Gentiles get salvation. Stop doing what you're not supposed to be doing and repent. I read this earlier concerning Naaman, right? Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria. I'm bringing this back up for a reason. 2 Kings 5:14-15. He went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And he returned to the man of God, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him, and he said, Indeed, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, therefore, please take a gift from your servant. So we see people can recognize who the Most High is without believing in the Messiah, without blood, without sacrifices, without calling on nobody's name, a Gentile, right? He says, now I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. And it's interesting because he goes on to say, he tells God, please forgive me when I go back to my land and I got to go and bow down before this idol where my king is. Because, if you don't bow with the king, you're subject to be put to death. So he knows that those are all idols and they're not real gods. So even a Gentile recognized there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. And he's a goy. So just to put that out there. Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian, Jeremiah 39:16-18. Go and speak to Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian, saying, Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will bring my words upon this city for adversity and not for good, and they shall be performed in that day before you. But I will deliver you in that day, says the Lord, and you shall not be given into the hand of the man of whom you are afraid, for I will surely deliver you, or save you. And you shall not fall by the sword, but your life shall be as a prize to you, because you have put your trust in me, says the Lord. So we see an African being saved by God. So there are some Christian groups out there that talk very bad about the African people and about other nations as well. So if you're reading the Tanakh, I just showed somebody from Syria, I showed a Philistine, and I showed Ethiopian that all are talking about being, one said, will you slay a righteous nation? One says, I know that there's only one God in Israel. And we see Ebed-Melech right here, the Ethiopian, being saved from trouble that's going to come his way. And the Most High says, because you trusted in me, I got you. And yes, he was a goy too. A mixed multitude, Deuteronomy 26:5. And you shall answer and say before the Lord your God, my father was a Syrian, about to perish. And he went down to Egypt and dwelt there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous. There he became a goy, right? Ezekiel 16:3. And say, thus says the Lord God to Jerusalem, your birth and your nativity are from the land of Canaan. Your father was an Amorite and your mother a Hittite. So what's going on here? Is his father a Syrian or is his father an Amorite? In context, Laban was a Syrian. When you go back and read the text, sometimes it calls him an Aramaean, sometimes it says Laban the Syrian. So we know Jacob's bloodline was Syrian, which is that whole empire of, Babylon, Assyria, that whole region, right? It can be a kind of a generic term because it's like saying American. Well, are you from Texas? Are you from California? You're from New York? Oh, you're an American. So in context, when it says your birth and your nativity are from the land of Canaan, your father was Amorite and your mother Hittite. Israel, most of the women that they married were Canaanites. Judah married a Canaanite woman, right? So, and it's also talking about the culture that these people grew up in as well, okay? So when you see the term Syrian and Canaanite and Hittite, it's not necessarily the people, it's the culture. Because you can be from China and raised in an American culture, okay? So Exodus 12:38. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock. So when Israel left Egypt, they left as a mixed multitude, a bunch of different people. And we can prove this, Leviticus 24:10. Now the son of an Israelite woman, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the children of Israel, and this Israelite woman's son and the men of Israel fought each other in the camp. So we see Israelites was married to Egyptian men, and it's probably vice versa. So let's not get the whole racial thing going, where we see Israel mixed with other nations. So let's not play the game of, oh, you don't have pure blood, you're not an Israelite, all these different things, where we see clearly that Egypt and Israel mixed. Judah married a Canaanite woman. So, Solomon took many wives from different nations. So a mixed multitude means just that. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite. Genesis 38:2-5. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. He was at Jezebel when she bore them. So we see the Israelites, or specifically the tribe of Judah, marry Canaanite women. 2 Samuel 24:18. And Gad came that day to David and said to him, go up, erect an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. We know the Jebusites were Canaanites. But there was an altar that was in a specific place owned by a Jebusite. So the Most High let this Jebusite, this Canaanite, have something very special in his possession. No discrimination. When you do what you got to do, when you do righteousness, the Most High created everybody. Everybody has a job to do. So it doesn't say go and take what Araunah the Jebusite has. It says no, erect an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. That's like an honor, right? And yet he was a goy. All nations shall flow to it. Isaiah 19:24-25. In that day, Israel will be one of three with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the land. Verse 25. Whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, blessed is Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. All three different goyim, right? Isaiah 2:2. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all goyim shall flow to it. Zechariah 14:16. And it shall come to pass that everyone who was left of all the goyim which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Side note, sometimes the word the word is there, and it really doesn't say nations, it just says peoples, but just means peoples, which can also be translated as nations, because it's basically saying the same thing. You could say, a crowd of people, crowd of men and women, talking about the same thing. So when they talk about nations and peoples, it's the same thing, right? So sometimes you're going to see the word nation and people translated as and goyim. but all goyim shall flow to it. So there's no hatred or belittling of nations just because the Most High calls them goy. And I just showed you Israel was called goy on multiple occasions as well. The everlasting covenant. Actually, the first covenant mentioned in the Tanakh, I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Genesis 9:8-10, right? Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and the beasts of the field of the earth with you, and all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Genesis 9:16. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. So anybody who's a descendant of Noah, which all of us are, has an everlasting covenant, which is represented by the rainbow. And so the rainbow does not mean what you see it to mean today. It represented a covenant given to us. And this covenant was given to all goyim because we would consist of all flesh that is on the earth. The first commandments, Genesis 2:16-17. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. From the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Technically, this is really not the first commandment because we know be fruitful and multiply. That can be looked at as a commandment, but that's more of human nature anyway. So that's what people are going to do, even if they were not commanded to do that. But specifically concerning something as a do and do not do, this was considered the first commandment because there was a very serious consequence attached to it. So, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat it. From the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Now, for those who try to say, well, they didn't die in the day that they ate it, right? We use this terminology many times when we say back in the day, right? Was it really a day or was it a time span? Well, back in the day, you couldn't talk to your parents like that. They knock your head off, right? Back in the day, we didn't have no money. Back in the day, those were the good old days, right? But it was back in the day. So in the day is not necessarily one day. It just means in the time span of, right? Genesis 3:17. Then to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake, and toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. So we see that there was a punishment, like I said earlier, for the specific commandment not to eat from the tree. Now, how do you rectify this, right? Genesis 4:7. If you do well, you will not be accepted. And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. So Adam and Eve would be assumed to be perfect when they were created. So if they had the capacity to sin as perfect people, we would also have the capacity to sin as perfect people. So this actually kills the concept of original sin, because how did these perfect people have the capacity to sin if they didn't have no forerunners of them that passed it down, right? It just shows you everybody is tested and everybody can make mistakes, even perfect people. But it says, if you do not do well, sin that lies at the door is desirous for you, but you should rule over it, meaning you can beat this. You have a free choice. You're not doomed to sin. Or the Most High would be lying when he says you should rule over it. Torah and mitzvot, which means the laws and commands, right? Genesis 6:14, make yourself an ark. This was a mitzvah or a command. Genesis 7:5, and Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. So that was a mitzvah for Noah. This is the root word is 6680 in the Strong's Savah, to lay charge upon, to give charge, command, to order. So Noah was given an order or a mitzvah to make himself an ark, right? So the concept of Torah and mitzvot does not originate with the laws of Moses. It was given long before that. Torah and mitzvot, Genesis 26:5, because Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my mitzvot, my statutes, and my Torahs. 84:51 in the Strongs. Wa Torate. Wa Towarote. Sorry. So, and this means my laws. 46:87, mitzvah, which was commanded, law, ordinance, precept, from savah, command, whether human or divine, collectively the law, which was commanded, law, ordinance, precept. So we see Torah mitzvot even from Noah and Abraham's time, well before the law is given at Mount Sinai. 33:84, Yara or Yara. 84:51 in the Strongs, Torah, direction, instruction, law. Torah, from Yara, a precept or statute, especially the Decalogue or Pentateuch law. Genesis 46:28. And he sent Judah before him to Joseph to direct his face to Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. So we see the root word of this word direct is to point out, and it's laho wa rot, to point out, right? Leviticus 14:57, to teach when it is unclean and to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy. So this can also mean to teach or direct, right? This is the whole point of having the Torah, is for instruction, to point out something, to let you know what's going on. A lot of times people hear the word law and they look at it as it is a legal term, but it's also something of a how-to. You can have a law, but if you don't know how to perform that law, you can still end up breaking it, right? If you don't know what jaywalking is, then just because you know, oh, I shouldn't jaywalk, but if you don't know exactly what that means, you can still end up breaking that simple law. So even though there is laws, there is the direction in those laws. Marriage and children. Like I said before, Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and multiply, can be looked upon as the first commandment, but it's something that people would tend to do anyway. But Genesis 1:28, then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over everything that moves on the earth. Genesis 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Genesis 9:1, so God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So we see at the beginning of the creation, once Adam had his wife and Noah came out of the ark, they all were told to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth with goyim. Abominations of those nations. Deuteronomy 29:17, and you saw their abominations and their idols, which were among them, wood and stone and silver and gold. Leviticus 18:27, for all these abominations the men of the land have done, who were before you, and thus the land is defiled. Deuteronomy 18:9, when you come into the land which the Lord your God has given you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. Now, what does this mean? Israel was told not to reflect the customs of the nations that were there before them, because they would lead them into doing the same things. Hence, you will be kicked out of the land like those nations before them were kicked out of the land. Hence, Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden for disobeying, right? So, even though Israel was the chosen nation, they actually started to do these things, these abominations, and they eventually were kicked out of the land for following the customs of those nations, which were abominations. So now if we get into what's called the 7 laws of Noah, there are actually more than that. It's more like 7 categories, but we'll go through them and you can decide how you want to categorize them. So blasphemy, Genesis 4:26. And as far as Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. Then man began to call on the name of the Lord. Now, on the surface, looking at this, it just sounds like people began to say God's name. But In reality, what this means is disrespecting the name. That word for call on the name or call is 2490 in the Strong's kalal, which means to bore, pierce, to dissolve, figuratively, to profane a person, place, or thing. So they began to profane the name of the Lord. We see the usage in Psalm 139 and 20, for they speak against you wickedly, your enemies take your name in vain. So this is what was being done to the Most High's name. So blasphemy is something frowned upon concerning the laws of Noah. And there's people who teach that there are no laws of Noah, that the rabbis made it up. Well, it's clearly in the text. So I don't know how the rabbis can make up something that's in the text. A lot of the laws that we read concerning the laws of Noah are mirrored in the laws of Moses. So blasphemy again, Leviticus 24:16. And whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him, the stranger, as well as him who is born in the land. When he blasphemes the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death. So even a stranger, right? 53:44, Nakab, appoint, blaspheme, bore, curse, express with holes, name, pierce. So to basically curse the name of the Lord, this is what this word means. No violence, Genesis 6 and 11. The earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Now, what's interesting today, we have an organization called Hamas in Israel. They're known as a terrorist group. That's what they call themselves. Hamas clearly means violence. Proverbs 3 and 31. Do not envy the violent or choose any of their ways. So this is not something that should be practiced. No murder. Genesis 9, 5-7. So we see way back in Genesis, murder was something that was not acceptable. Even in Genesis, earlier in Genesis chapter 4, where Cain kills his brother, the Most High told him, watch yourself. Sin lies at the door. You can rule over it. So we have laws concerning manslaughter way before the Torah was actually given at Mount Sinai. Genesis 9, 5-7. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever shed man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God he made man. Genesis 37 and 22. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood. Remember, they wanted to kill Joseph, but he was like, don't do it. Genesis 42 and 22. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy, and you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. So Reuben's like, see, we're responsible for him being killed. So now his blood is required of us, right? Or not necessarily being killed, but being taken away, or something happened to him where they didn't know what happened to him. They assumed he was either stolen away or, maybe he died when he was in Egypt. But he was basically saying, behold, his blood is now required of us. No idolatry. Genesis 35 and 2. And Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you and be clean and change your garments. Joshua 24 and 14. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your father served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. So we can see that way before Mount Sinai, the Gentiles knew what idolatry was. So he even told them, put away the strange gods that are among you and be clean, right? And Joshua is referring to the gods that they worshipped prior to coming up out of Egypt. So idolatry was also a problem and frowned upon before the Torah was given. No blood consumption. Genesis 9 and 4. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Now, the dietary laws given to the nations or the sons of Noah did not have the restrictions that we find in Leviticus 11, but you still could not eat nothing with its blood still there. Sexual immorality. In this case, we're talking about rape. Genesis 34 and 2. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. And the Israelites, her brothers, were pretty upset about this. I know some Israelites or Christians teach that raping people is okay. I don't know where they would get this from, but this is what it says. This was something that was frowned upon by Israel themselves. Sexual immorality. In this case, we're talking about harlotry and homosexuality, Genesis 13:13. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly, Genesis 19:5. They called out to Lot and said, where are the men who came to you tonight? Send them out to us so we can have sex with them. Genesis 34:31. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with an harlot? So we see that the way that they looked upon this was not a good thing. So Genesis 38:15, when Judah saw her, he thought to her to be a harlot because she had covered her face. So back then, when you would cover your face, kind of like how you see a lot of the Muslim women dressed today, covering of the face would signify you to be a prostitute, not necessarily being modest. Covering of the hair, yes, but covering your face was a whole nother kind of a deal. So we see sexual immorality was something that was already in place back in the times, and there was punishments for it. No kidnapping or human trafficking. Genesis 37:27. Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh, and his brethren were content. So basically, Judah was like, let's not kill him, let's sell him, right? Genesis 40:15. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews. Here also I have done nothing that they should put me in the dungeon. So kidnapping or stealing was something that was basically not cool. This was not a practice that should have been overlooked. And we see that Israel was basically going to participate in a type of a slave trade. We're going to sell our brother. We kidnapped him, and we're going to sell him. Now, this wasn't racially motivated, but it was still taking someone from among your own and trying to sell them to make money. No sex crimes, which will still basically be under sexual immorality. This time we're talking about adultery. Genesis 20:3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. So we see, if this wasn't a problem, the Most High wouldn't have came to Abimelech and addressed it. Genesis 35:22. And it happened when Israel dwelt in the land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. So we see somebody dealing with another man's wife. It says Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Israel heard about it. So we know there's a law in the Torah that says don't uncover the nakedness of your father, meaning don't be messing with his women. So this is way before the Torah was given. So they had morality and guidelines of how to conduct themselves amongst people back then, way before the Torah was given. No stealing, Genesis 31:30. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my goods? So Laban's like, why'd you steal my stuff, right? Genesis 31:32. With whomsoever thou findest thy goods, let him not live. Before our brethren, discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen him. So Jacob even said, whoever you find your stuff, let them die. That's not something that's overlooked very easily. It was a very serious punishment back then. Genesis 44:8-9. Behold, the money which we found in our sacks' mouths, we brought again unto thee out of the land of Canaan. How then we should steal out of the Lord's house silver or gold? With whomsoever thy servants it be found, both let him die, and we also will be my Lord's bondmen. So the brothers were like, whoever stole it, let him die, which means they recognized that this to be a crime. So stealing, again, another one of those commands that was given before the Torah. Set up judges. This is something that most societies in the world have some type of legal system, whether you be in the jungle or in the city. There's some type of rulership or some type of judgment system set up in case there's wrongs going on. and damages, things of that nature. Job 31:11. For this is a heinous crime, it is an iniquity to be punished by the judges. Psalm 2:10. Be wise now, therefore, all ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Proverbs 8:16. By me princes rule and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. So it says judges of the earth, so that would imply there was judges all over the earth that was using wisdom to run their kingdoms. So the setting up of the judges is something that is told for us to do to be able to run societies. Salvation and redemption and repentance of the Gentiles. Job 22:29. When men are cast down, then thou shalt say, there is lifting up, and he shall save the humble person. There's your salvation. Job 5:19. He shall deliver thee in 6 troubles, in 7 there shall no evil touch thee. So we see you get delivered or salvation in 6 troubles, right? When you are in trouble, that's a whole other concept of salvation. Not saving people from sins, but when you are in trouble. Job 6:23. Or deliver me from the enemy's hand, or redeem me from the hand of the mighty. So we see they already had a concept of being delivered and redeemed from the enemy's hands, not from their sins, but from the enemies. Job 29:12. Because I delivered the poor that cried, and the fatherless of him that had none to help him. So we see again the concept of deliverance or salvation concerning the Gentiles. Clothed with righteousness. Job 29:14. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My judgment was a robe and a diadem. Psalm 132:9. Let thy priests be clothed with righteousness, and let thy saints shout for joy. So we see Gentiles have the same concept of putting on righteousness or being clothed with it, just as the priests of Israel did. Righteousness is righteous. Everybody has their lane to fill and their job to do. The priests had their job of being clothed with righteousness. And Job says, I put on righteousness. Read the whole chapter of Job 29. He tells you what he did when he put on those clothes of righteousness. Even the Christians have a concept of salvation of God being sent to the Gentiles. Acts 15:11. But we believe that through the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, we shall be saved in the same manner as they. So even though this is a Christian way of looking at it, they also believe that they will be saved as they. Now, who's the they? Acts 28:28. Therefore, let it be known to you that the salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles, and they shall hear it, or they will hear it. Now, this is the Christian version of salvation, but the reason I'm bringing this up, because people know I don't, rock with the New Testament. There's Christians teaching that there aren't going to be any Gentiles that are going to be saved. Well, the Tanakh doesn't teach that, and the New Testament actually starts out saying, don't go to the Gentiles and give them the gospel. But we clearly see right here, Paul saying that salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles. So I don't even know how they can even teach that. So just to bring that up, though, just to make that point. If righteousness comes through the law, then Christ died in vain. Well, earlier I showed that if in Ezekiel 14, if Noah, Daniel, and Job were before me, they would save themselves through their righteousness. And I've shown that, there was Torah and mitzvot back then, which would be their laws, and they would use that law to apply righteousness, and they would be saved, which would mean Jesus died in vain. Galatians 2:21. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness comes through the law, then Christ died in vain. Deuteronomy 6:25. Then it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all these commandments before the Lord our God as he has commanded us. So clearly right there, we see righteousness is observance of the law. So that would make, Galatians 2:21 true, that Jesus did die in vain, because righteousness does come through the law. Ezekiel 18:9. Such a man obeys my commands and carefully keeps my laws. He is righteous, and he will live, says the sovereign Lord. Romans 2:13. For not the hearers of the law are righteous before God, but the doers of the law will be declared righteous. That right there, Paul contradicts himself. Luke 1:6. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blameless. So we see the New Testament contradicting itself and the Torah as well. We see Galatians 2:21 contradicting Deuteronomy 6:25, and clearly, if it says that in Luke 1:6 they were both righteous before God, walking in the commandments, that's a man and a woman was keeping the commandments, and they were both righteous. So Jesus died in vain, according to Paul. Another proof of Galatians 2:21, basically proven out of Paul's mouth that Jesus did die in vain, is it says if righteousness came through the law, Jesus died in vain. But we see in Daniel 4:27, break off your sins by being righteous. So that means you can get rid of your sins by being righteous, and we know righteousness is by keeping the law. So advice given to a Gentile king teaches us the importance of charity, or showing mercy to the poor. It is a great way to break off sins and lengthen prosperity in life. Daniel 4:27. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. Psalm 41:1-3. To the chief musician, a psalm of David. Blessed is he who considers the poor. The Lord will deliver him in the time of trouble, or save him in time of trouble. The Lord will preserve him and keep him alive, and he will be blessed on the earth. You will not deliver him to the will of his enemies. The Lord will strengthen him on his bed of illness. You will sustain him on his sick bed. So we see charity is huge. Proverbs 29:7. The righteous considers the cause of the poor, but the wicked does not understand such knowledge. So the wicked people don't get it, that they can get a lot of their sins. They can break away a lot of their sins by showing mercy to the poor with all that money that they have. But such knowledge, the wicked do not understand. So like I've been saying for a while now is, the Gentiles had a Torah. It wasn't the Torah given in Mount Sinai, but they had instructions. They had Torah and mitzvot. So we see Torah from his mouth, right? So there must have been a standard for Job to put on righteousness, as I showed in Job 29, just like the priests of Israel, right? The standard was the Torah of the Gentiles given to Adam, Noah, and Abraham. For example, Job 22:22, receive, please, instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. That word for instruction is Torah. Look it up in the Strongs. So like I said earlier, Israel was supposed to be a light to the Gentiles. So if the Gentiles were around Israel and was paying attention, they would have been aware of many of their customs and traditions and laws and statutes and commandments. Job 24:13. They are those that rebel against the light. They know not the ways thereof, nor abide in the paths thereof. Now, what is the light? Proverbs 6:23. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. Isaiah 8:20. To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Isaiah 51:4. Hearken unto me, my people, and give ear unto me, O my nation, my goyim, right? My goy, for a law shall proceed from me, and I will make my judgment rest for a light of the people. So we see that the law is light, and the Gentiles were aware of this light. We see Job says there's those who rebel against the light, right? They know not the ways thereof, nor abide in the paths thereof. Redemption. Redemption is a concept that was already known by the Gentiles way before Mount Sinai. And let's see. Psalm 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Now we know this is coming from Israel. Job 33:28. He will deliver his soul from going into the pit, and his life shall see the light. Now this light will be considered concerning life, but it says he would deliver his soul from going into the pit. Deliverer would be redemption, right? Job 36:15. He delivered the poor in his affliction and opened their ears in oppression. So again, deliverance, redemption, and salvation is all kind of one and the same, being
taken out of a bad situation, right? So they see that he delivers the poor in his affliction. Job 13 and 16. He also shall be my salvation, for a hypocrite shall not come before him. So they know that the Most High is their Redeemer, and he delivers them and gives them salvation. Way back in the book of Job. Remember, Job had friends that came to him. They're going back and forth. So they're sharing concepts of deliverance and salvation, and they know that they have a Redeemer. Again, we see a mitzvah being given in the book of Job, commanded that they return from iniquity. That word for return is repent. Job 36, 7 through 12. He withdraweth not his eyes from the righteous, but with kings are they on the throne. Yeah, he doth establish them forever, and they are exalted. And if they are bound in fetters and be holden in cords of affliction, then he showed them their work and their transgressions that they have exceeded. He opened also their ear to discipline and commanded that they return from iniquity. If they observe and serve him, they shall spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasures. But if they obey not, they shall perish by the sword and die, and they shall die without knowledge. So we see here clearly in the book of Job, the concept of repentance will get you prosperity, and disobedience will get you death. Way before the Tanakh was given. Rahab and Ishmael. So again, we're going to deal with some Gentiles that were given blessings, right, before Israel was a nation, and that God does look upon the Gentiles with favor at times. Joshua 6 and 17. Now the city shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction, and it and all who are in it. Only Rahab, the harlot, shall live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. Remember, Joshua sent out the spies, and they were hidden, and they were blessed for that. Genesis 17 and 20. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great goy. Remember, a great nation. I read this earlier. So we see Rahab and Ishmael are two of many examples of Gentiles being blessed, although they're not considered part of the chosen nation. God saw their works. Now, I did bring this up earlier, but now I'm going to go into a little bit more details concerning Nineveh and how a nation that existed alongside Israel, even though Israel was a chosen nation, there was still other nations that still was able to receive salvation when they repented and turned from their evil ways. Jonah chapter 3, verse 1. And the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the second time, saying, Arise and go unto Nineveh, that great city, and preach unto it the preaching that I bid thee. So Jonah arose and went into Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city of 3 days' journey, and Jonah began to enter the city a day's journey, and he cried and said, Yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. So the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast. We see how important fasting is. Excuse me. And put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. For the word came unto the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne, and laid his robe from him, and covered him with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he caused it to be proclaimed and published through Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, saying, Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything, let them not feed nor drink water, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and cry mightily unto God. Yeah, let them turn everyone from his evil way, and from the violence that is in their hands. Who can tell if God will turn and repent, and turn away from his fierce anger, that we perish not? And God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God repented of the evil that he said that he would do to them, and he did not do it. So we see clearly fasting, turning from your evil way, put away the violence that was in their hands, right? God saw their works. So yes. And we also see God saw their faith. Verse 5, so the people of Nineveh believed God, so they had faith, but they actually had works behind it, because it says God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way. So they had to do something to prove that they believed God. They fasted and they stopped doing what they were doing that got them basically a decree to be destroyed in the first place. So Gentiles have the same opportunity to repent and find favor with God just as Israel does. This is the verse that a lot of Israelites do not want to deal with because they can't hold the superiority thing and take it out of context when this verse exists. There is none like him in the earth. Job 1:8. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Job 2:3. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil, and still he hold fast his integrity, although thou move me against him to destroy him without cause. So, not only do we see the verse repeated, we see that the things that happened to him, he didn't even deserve it. Because it says, you move me to destroy him without cause. Meaning he was righteous, he was perfect, he feared God, he was an upright person. And this was a Gentile. Had no knowledge of a Messiah that had to die for him to have this perfect status before God, for the Most High to tell the Satan, there is none like him in the earth. And this is a goy. So if God doesn't like the goy, why would he say there's none like him on earth? One who fears God and turns from evil, perfect and upright. On top of Job being rich, on top of Job 29, that tells you what he did to even get the status of it being none like him in the earth. So next time you hear people talking about, oh no, God doesn't like the Gentiles, read them Job chapter 2 and 3, Job chapter 1 and 8, and Job chapter 29. This man was perfect. Job 1 and 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and this man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and abstained from evil. Right? This was a goy, Genesis 6, 8 through 9. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Another goy, Genesis 17 and 1. And when Abraham was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect. So we see 3 perfect goyim, should I say, and none of them are Israelites. We know Israel came from Abram or Abraham, but another interesting thing is Job is presented as being perfect. Noah is presented being perfect. Abraham is told to be perfect. Walk before me and be perfect. So let's just really consider how, I don't want to say stupid, but misinformed people are when they try to talk down to people that are not Israelites. Indeed, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Job 42, 10 through 14. And the Lord restored Job's losses when he prayed for his friends. Indeed, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then all his brothers, all his sisters, and all those who had been his acquaintances before came to him and ate food with him in his house. And they consoled him and comforted him for all the adversity that the Lord had brought upon him. Each one gave him a piece of silver and each a ring of gold. So we see it was the Most High who was testing Job, and he used Satan to test him. Verse 12, Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he called the name of the first Jemimah. You remember that? Remember that name? Jemimah? The name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Karen, Hapuch. So concerning the testing of Job, read Job chapter 7, read Genesis 22 verse 1, read Exodus 20 and 20. We're all here for a test, and Job passed his very serious test. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. So we see converts, right? Ruth 1 and 16. But Ruth said, Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. From where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people should be my people, and your God, my God. So we see Ruth, we know she was a convert from the Moabites. Psalm 19 and 7. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. So if the Torah converts the soul, not only does it just make you become a better person, but if you would like to completely convert your soul and become an Israelite, you can do that as well. Psalm 51:13. Then I will teach transgressors thy ways, and sinners shall be converted unto thee. A sinner can be a Jew or a Gentile. The point is, the law is perfect, and that's what converts the soul. That's where you find your righteousness, which again in Galatians 2:21 proves that Jesus did die in vain, because the Most High's law is perfect and it does convert the soul, and that's what makes you righteous. So you really didn't need nobody to die for you if you could repent, because you had knowledge of the law. Learn not the way of the heathen. Again, this word heathen is the same word for goy or nation or Gentile, and it's completely misused by people who don't know what it means. Like every time you heard Esther call Fred a heathen, she was just basically calling him a nation, which is not an insult as she wanted it to be. Jeremiah 10:2. Thus said the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. Jeremiah 16:19. O Lord, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the days of affliction. The Gentiles, or the goys, shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there was no profit. So the Gentiles are basically going to acknowledge, look, we had it wrong. Our fathers was lying to us. We're going to come and rock with y'all. Zechariah 8:23. Thus said the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men out of all the languages of the goyim shall take hold, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Not hold of the skirt of a Christian, but a Jew, an Israelite, Yehudim. So this is why Israel was told not to learn the way of the heathen, because the heathen are actually going to learn the ways of the Torah, like it says in Isaiah chapter 2, 1-4. So the Gentiles are going to acknowledge, yeah, we was fed some nonsense, but we're going to go and find that Israelite. 10 men from out of all the languages of the nations. My name shall be great among the heathen, said the Lord of hosts. Great among the nations. Malachi 1:11. For from the rising of the sun, even unto the going down of the same, my name shall be great among the Gentiles. And in every place incense shall be offered unto my name, and a pure offering. For my name shall be great among the heathen, said the Lord of hosts. Isaiah 66:19-20. I will set a sign among them, and those among them who escape I will send to the nations, to Tarshish and Pool and Lud, who draw the bow, and to Baal and Javan, to the coastlands afar off, who have not heard of my fame, nor seen my glory. And they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. Then they shall bring all your brethren for an offering to the Lord out of all nations, on horses and in chariots and in litters, on mules and on camels, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, says the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord. So we see Israel dealing with the Gentiles. They're going to go among them, declare the Most High's name, and then they're going to be brought back and bring offerings to the Most High. Malachi 1:14. But cursed be the deceiver who has in his flock a male, and takes a vow, but sacrifices to the Lord what is blemished. For I am a great king, says the Lord of hosts, and my name is to be feared among the nations. If the Most High did not like the Gentiles, why would he want their name feared among him? And we know fear is wisdom, Job 28:28. And wisdom gets you salvation, because fear is wisdom. And Psalm 145:19 says he will save those who fear him. So out of the fear of the Most High, you get salvation. So when it says my name is to be feared among the nations, that fear will in turn get them salvation. A house of prayer for all nations. Isaiah 56:6-7. Also the sons of the foreigner, who join themselves to the Lord to serve him, and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone who keeps from defiling the Sabbath, and holds fast my covenant. Even them I will bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. It doesn't say except anyone, all nations. Now, of course, this will be the nations that survived the final war in Zechariah 14. But yet still, a house of prayer for all nations or all goyim, right? When foreigners entered his gates. So the reason why I bring this up is because there's a lot of Israelites that will tell you that when it says foreigner and stranger and convert, it's really just talking about Israelites. Sometimes it is, but there's other times when it's not, because they don't want that word to reflect any type of salvation being given to the Gentiles, because some people just want to hold on to the chosen nation thing and basically exclude everybody else from having any type of salvation. But that's clearly what's not taught in the Tanakh, and I've showed that over and over tonight. Obadiah 1 and 11. In the day that you stood on the other side, in the day that strangers carried captive his forces, when foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, even you were as one of them. So you can ask them, the strangers apply to is those Israelites who carried away his forces captive? When foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, were those foreigners just really Israelites, or were they really foreigners, right? Genesis 31:15. Are we not counted of him strangers? For he has sold us and has quite devoured also our money. So we see another word for stranger or foreigner right here. Now, technically, these women were not Israelites, but they were wives of Jacob, right? Exodus 21 and 8. If she pleases not her master, who has betrothed her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed, to sell her to a strange nation. He shall have no power, seeing he has dealt deceitfully with her. So is this strange nation also just other Israelites, or is this really referring to a foreign nation? Moreover, concerning a stranger that is not your people, right? We're going to deal with this, where this verse comes from. But Deuteronomy 14 and 21. You shall not eat of anything that dies of itself. You shall give it to the stranger that is in your gates. So is this Israelite that is a stranger in your gates? Why wouldn't he just be called an Israelite? That he may eat it, because we know Israelite is not allowed to eat something like this. So why would the Most High say you can give it to a stranger if that stranger really is just an Israelite? Or you may sell it to an alien. Is that also an Israelite? For you are an holy people to the Lord your God. You should not see the kid in his mother's milk. Deuteronomy 17:15. You shall in any wise set a king over you, whom the Lord your God shall choose. One from among your brothers shall you set king over you. You may not set a stranger over you, which is not your brother. So is that stranger really just an Israelite? But it says, which is not your brother. So they can't use the terminology across the board. You see, they got to pick and choose when they want it to apply to Israel, because it clearly says you may not set a stranger over you. So if that's really just an Israelite that has been estranged from the nation, that would mean he is really your brother. But it says you shall not set somebody who is not your brother over you. So you can have a little bit of ammunition when you're dealing with this topic. So, moreover, concerning a foreigner who is not of your people Israel. 1 Kings 81 through 43. I'm sorry, 1 Kings 8, 41 through 43. Moreover, concerning a foreigner who is not of your people Israel, but has come from a far country for your name's sake. So these are Gentiles who have heard of the Most High's glory and fame, and they're coming because they've heard what he can do for them, just like Naaman did, right? For they will hear of your great name and your strong hand and your outstretched arm when he comes and prays toward this temple. Here in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all from which the foreigner calls to you, that all peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this temple which I have built is called by your name. So clearly it's talking to the Gentiles who hear of you, these foreigners who are coming from a faraway country, hear of your name, and is not your people Israel. So when it says a foreigner who is not of your people, this is not somebody who's an Israelite that is estranged. This is clearly a real foreigner. Loves the stranger. Deuteronomy 10 and 18. He administers justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the stranger, giving him food and clothing. So clearly the Most High loves the stranger, right? 2 Samuel 1 and 13. I am the son of an alien, and Amalekite. So there's that word alien again, or that word ger, which would refer to a stranger or a foreigner, right? Psalm 119 and 19. I am a stranger in the earth. There goes the word ger again. Isaiah 14 and 1. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall join the house of Jacob. You wouldn't have to join the house of Israel or the house of Jacob if you were already part of the nation of Israel, right? So this word again, ger, stranger, alien, there's other words actually used to describe that, but in context, it is not always referring to an Israelite. It's clearly referring to somebody who really is truly foreign. But the Most High loves the stranger. Everyone that is left of all the nations. Zechariah 14:16. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which come against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So if you're left from all the nations which come against Jerusalem, you're probably not Israelite. You from the nations that actually have attacked Jerusalem. Isaiah 2 and 2. And it shall come to pass in the last days, that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations, all goyim, shall flow unto it. Right? Isaiah 45 and 22. Look unto me and be saved, all the ends of the earth, for I am God and there is none else. All the ends of the earth is told to look to the Most High. There is none else, right? So this will refer to the nations, all the goyim, right? Look unto me and be saved, all the ends of the earth, for I am God and there is none else. Very clear. So how you can get from that the Most High does not like the Gentiles, I don't know. He shall speak peace to the goyim, or to the nations. Zechariah 9 through 10. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt and the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem. The battle bow shall be cut off. He shall speak peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. So we see that the Messiah will speak peace to the nations, right? Now, I know some will say, well, no, that's referring to Jesus. He rode it on a donkey. Well, he had nothing to do with cutting off the chariot from Ephraim, right? And the horse from Jerusalem. The battle bow shall be cut off. Jesus didn't do that. He shall speak peace to the nations. Jesus says, I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. His dominion shall be from sea to sea. Jesus told Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world, right? This person's kingdom is from the river to the ends of the earth, of this world. So that's not referring to Jesus. But the context of this is the Messiah will speak peace to the nations, or the Gentiles, or the goyim. Why would he speak peace to the goyim if the Most High does not like the goyim? They don't have salvation. Then who are you speaking to? Doesn't make any sense. Oh man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you? Right? Man, we're just talking about people. Micah 6:6-8. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, for the fruit of my body, for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? Right? We saw Enoch walked with God. We saw Noah walked with God, right? To love mercy. We were already shown that when you give mercy to the poor, that will get you salvation. To do justly or righteously, right? Or that can even mean a type of judgment, to give righteous judgments, which means that you're using your Torah to rule your land or yourself or your household. Oh man, what is good? So this is not necessarily referring to a nation. This is just people in general. What do you do? What is required? Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Because it says he will give the grace to the humble, and he saves the humble person. Humility is how you get salvation. So going back again to the laws of Noah, we're going to parallel them with what the disciples decreed for the Gentiles who believe to get salvation should be doing. Now, when I say the Gentiles who believe, these were the Gentiles who believed in Jesus. And the disciples had decided that they were not obligated to keep the laws of Moses, as some of the Jews were insisting that they do, like circumcision and things like that. So the disciples came up with a list of things to the believing Christian Gentiles that they should do to attain salvation. Now, I've already shown that they didn't have to be Christian, or any type of Gentile does not have to be a Christian or an Israelite to obtain redemption and salvation. But this is the Christian concept, so I'm just explaining what they teach in Acts 21 and 25. It says, "But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality." I've already shown how idolatry was already forbidden, blood was already forbidden, and sexual immorality. But things strangled was not necessarily mentioned in the Tanakh or in the beginning concerning the Gentiles. Now, Israel themselves were told not to eat things strangled, and they were allowed to sell this meat to the strangers and the foreigners. Now the disciples is adding this to the list of things forbidden to the foreigner. But if these foreigners had already had any type of exposure to Israel or that light to the Gentiles, they would have already been abstaining from this to begin with. So there's a couple more scriptures that bring this up, so I'm going to bring it all the way out. Strangled meat, Exodus 22 and 31. "And ye shall be holy men unto me, neither shall ye eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field, ye shall cast it to the dogs." Leviticus 7:24. "And the fat of the beast that dieth of itself, and the fat of that which is torn with beasts, may be used in any other use, but ye shall in no wise eat of it." Leviticus 22 and 8. "That which dieth of itself, or is torn with beasts, he shall not eat it to defile himself therewith. I am the Lord." Ezekiel 44 and 31. "The priest shall not eat of anything that is dead of itself or torn, whether it be fowl or beast." Torn, strangled, this is pretty much the same concept. It wasn't ritually slaughtered food. So the disciples decreed that the Gentiles also should partake in such a commandment. Eating meat offered to idols. So this is another one of those crucial laws given in the Tanakh as well as the New Testament. Acts 15 and 20 says, "But that we write unto them that they abstain from pollution of idols and from fornication and from things strangled and from blood." Acts 15:29. "That ye abstain from meats offered to idols and from blood and from things strangled and from fornication, from which if you keep yourselves, you shall do well, fare ye well." So we know that idolatry, fornication, eating things strangled, and blood, these are all things mentioned in the Tanakh already. Well, not specifically strangled animals to the Gentiles, but definitely to Israel. And we know that if any type of Gentile came across Israel, they would be enlightened to not eating things torn or strangled. The crucial part of this specific verse that I'm about to go a little deeper into is eating things offered to idols, which from a Tanakh point of view would be drinking the blood of Jesus and eating his bread or his flesh, be that symbolically or spiritually, however you want to term that. This is the equivalent of idolatry. So it's interesting that the New Testament forbids eating things offered to idols. And we know today there is idols of Jesus all over the world, and people eat that bread and drink his blood symbolically as a remembrance of him. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood. Now, one of the problems is this is the equivalent of idolatry, eating the flesh of a man and drinking his blood. This is what people used to do in light of their idols, and how they would offer these sacrifices to their idols and have feasts, and people will come and join them, which I'm going to show a little bit later. But let's deal with this. Ezekiel 39:17-18. And as for you, son of man, thus says the Lord God. Of course, this son of man is not Jesus, it's Ezekiel. Speak to every sort of bird and to every beast of the field. Assemble yourselves and come, gather together from all sides to my sacrificial meal, which I am sacrificing for you, a great sacrificial meal on the mountains of Israel, that you may eat flesh and drink blood. You shall eat the flesh of the mighty, drink the blood of the princes of the earth, of rams and of lambs, of goats and bulls, all of them fatlings of Bashan. So we see animals are told to eat the flesh and drink the blood of people, not the Israelites. This is animals. John 6:56. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me and I in him. Now, one of the problems with this is the New Testament teachers will tell you, well, this is all symbolic. It's not physical. Well, according to Jesus, when you make sins symbolically or in your heart, it's just as if you did it. Matthew 5:28. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery in his heart. So even by thinking that you're drinking blood or eating the flesh of a man would already be a problem, according to Jesus himself. So when he tells you to eat his flesh and drink his blood, this is something that animals would partake in. The Most High said this is a sacrificial meal for you, of rams and of lambs and of goats. Drink the blood of the princes of the earth. Jesus is considered a prince to the Christians. He's called the Prince of Peace, although he said he didn't come to bring peace but a sword. This is still how they view him. So this would not be allowed in the Tanakh. Do this in remembrance of me. So Jesus is called the Passover lamb to the Christians, but he basically took the Passover holiday and turned it into something for himself. Not the remembering the coming up out of Egypt, but he says in Luke 22:19, and he took bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Not the actual Passover, but for him. 1 Corinthians 11:24-25. And when he had given thanks, he broke and said, take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. So this is equivalent to a sacrifice to him. So you would be literally eating with people who are eating something sacrificed to an idol. So in the book of Acts, when the disciples write, keep away from things sacrificed to idols, this would include Jesus. Lest you act corruptly and make for yourself a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. Why would the Most High give a direct command to not make images of males or females to be worshipped, and then send the likeness of a male, which would be Jesus, to be worshipped? Deuteronomy 4:15-16. Take careful heed to yourselves, for you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and make for yourself a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. Now we see in Romans 1:23, and change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. So Jesus was in the image of a man, which according to Romans 1:23 is corruptible. Colossians 1:15, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. He is the image of the invisible God. If God is invisible and people saw Jesus, that would make him an image. And we're just told, do not corrupt yourself and make anything in the likeness of a male or a female. So this will be considered an idol and worshipped. We know people worship Jesus today. Now, some Christians don't, but some do. And they offer sacrifices to him. This would be offering things to idols. You have neither heard his voice at any time, nor seen his form. This would confirm that nobody ever saw Jesus in the Tanakh. John 14:7. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know him and have seen him. So he's claiming now you see God. So that means in the Tanakh you didn't see God. John 14:9. Jesus said unto him, have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, show us the Father? So this will confirm that even in John chapter 1, it says no man has seen God at any time. This would mean Jesus would not be God, because if that's the case, somebody would have saw him in the Old Testament, and we know nobody can see God and live, so that means anybody who would have seen God in the Old Testament would have died. And face to face, that is, they saw the glory of God coming down in the cloud and things like that, but no one has seen the Most High. John 5:37. And the Father himself who sent me has testified of me. You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. So nobody heard Jesus in the Old Testament, and nobody saw Jesus. And the problem with this is everybody heard the voice of the Most High at Mount Sinai. He even says, what nation has heard the voice of God and lived like we have? So this would make John 5:37 a lie. The image of his person. Hebrews 1:3. Who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person. Now we know the Most High says, I will not give my glory to another. So for this to say, being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, cannot be referring to the Most High. Revelation 13:14. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. So what's interesting about this is Jesus has been made into an image. And we can say the beast would be the Roman Empire. They have made him into an image. He was wounded and lived according to the New Testament, or he was killed and lived. Now, I'm not saying that Revelation 13:14 is referring to Jesus, but they make a statement that sounds a little suspect. Exodus 33:20. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. Now, the problem with this is in John 20:28, and Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God. If Thomas is looking at the Most High in the image of Jesus, as it says he is the express image of his person, then Thomas should have died. So what's interesting is the New Testament tells you to stay away from idolatry, stay away from images and things of this nature, but yet they want to have Jesus as their God or their idol. And it just doesn't make any sense. If you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. This would also mean that Genesis 18, when Christians try to say, oh, that was God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost, that means Abraham would have died if he would have saw the Most High. And Jesus says no man has seen God or heard his voice. So even according to the New Testament, this whole concept doesn't hold any water. To whom shall I be equal? Isaiah 40:25. To whom then will you liken me, or to whom shall I be equal, says the Holy One. Isaiah 46:5. To whom will you liken me and make me equal and compare me that we should be alike? So the Most High said twice, I'm not nobody's equal. Nobody's like me. Philippians 2:6. Who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, So again, if Jesus was in the form of God, then that means nobody would have been able to live if they saw him. So this doesn't make any sense. And then people want to say, well, spiritually speaking, he was showing the love of God. And it says being in the form of God. The form. Not in his personality, not doing things God would do. First of all, God wouldn't have ran from nobody. God wouldn't have got beat up and spit on and do some other things that Jesus did. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because even the disciples said the Gentiles have to stay away from idolatry. And this is all signs of idolatry according to the New Testament, because it's claiming that Jesus was in the form of God and was God. He says he was equal with God. And the Tanakh says the Most High has no equals. Jesus says the Father is greater than I, confirming they are not equal. Acts 13:6, concerning Jesus in the name of other gods. And when they had gone through the isle unto Paphos, they found a certain sorcerer, a false prophet, a Jew, whose name was Bar Jesus. So if he was Bar Jesus, or son of Jesus, who was the Jesus he was the son of? Matthew 27:17. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, which one do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus who was called the Messiah? So there was two Jesuses in jail, right? Jesus Barabbas, which would mean Jesus Bar, son, Abbas, son of the Father. So they had a choice to get Jesus, the son of the Father, released, or Jesus who was called the Messiah. Interesting, because some translations don't have Jesus Barabbas. It just says Barabbas there. Colossians 4:11. And Jesus who was called Justus, who are of the circumcision. These only are my fellow workers for the kingdom of God, who have been a comfort unto me. So Paul was rolling with a dude named Jesus, who was called Justus. It says they're my fellow workers. We know Paul never met Jesus, so he's not talking about the Jesus of the Gospels. So if you was to people, if you was to tell somebody, I believe in Jesus, they're going to say, well, which one? Or Joshua or Yeshua, which one? Moses' successor, right? How many other people is named Yeshua besides these people I just mentioned here? Jeshua, Nehemiah 9:5. Then the Levites, Jeshua or Yeshua, and Kadmiel, Benai, Hashabniah, Sherebiah, Hodijah, Shebaniah, and Pethahiah said, stand up and bless the Lord your God forever and ever, and blessed be thy glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. So we see here in Nehemiah 9:5, Yeshua was a Levite, but he still don't have the name of the Most High, because it says, stand up and bless the Lord your God forever and ever. We know when it says the Lord your God, it's usually saying the tetragrammaton. And it says, thy glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. So Yeshua is not the name of the Most High, and many prophets had the Most High's name. Isaiah, Elijah, Jeremiah, you know what I'm saying? So Shebaniah, the ayah is in a lot of the people's names. Yeshua. So all these are derivatives of how the Most High's name is used in people's names. So Numbers 13:16. These are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua, or Yeshua. Ezra 2:6. The children of Pathamoab, and the children of Jeshua and Joab, 2,812. So Yeshua or Jeshua are just names, but they have nothing to do with the Most High in the sense of they are closer to him or anything of that nature just because they have that name. So if you was to tell somebody, oh, I believe in Yeshua, like I said earlier, they're going to say, well, which one? You know what I mean? People's name, Yeshua or Joshua? And what about, Bar Yeshua? Who was that dude, right? And his son was a false prophet. Now, as far as I know, Jesus had no children, so I don't think Bar Jesus was the son of that Jesus. but there was another Jesus rolling around too. So being caught up with what his name means is, it really doesn't matter. No prophet ever told us, based on the name of the prophet is how you're supposed to treat him, right? That's not how it works. Jesus in the name of other gods. So eating things offered to idols or things done in the name of other gods, like, for instance, being baptized in the name of other gods is idolatry. Eating food offered to idols, and I'm pretty sure they probably mentioned that idol's name when they eat. That would also be idolatry. So you hear Christians say, well, Yeshua means Yah is salvation. True. But just because somebody has that name does not mean that that's what they're about, because he wasn't the first one with this name, first of all. But let's deal with this real quick. Exodus 23:13. And in all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods, neither let it be heard out of thy mouth. So since Jesus is considered a God in the New Testament, in John 20:28, it says he's equal with God in the book of Philippians. Mark 16:17, and these signs shall follow them that believe in my name. They shall cast out devils, and they shall speak with new tongues, right? It says in my name, not the name of the Most High, but his name. John 1:12, but as many as received him, to them he gave power to become the sons of God, even to those who believe in his name. Why don't they say believe in the name of the Most High? Why say believe in his name? Now, Jesus wasn't the only one with this name in the New Testament. There was a false prophet that was also the son of Jesus. His name was Bar Jesus. So that means there was a Jesus who had a son named Bar Jesus. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. Now, using its own philosophy against itself, to not even eat with such a person. This is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5:11. But now I have written to you not to keep company with anyone named a brother who is sexually immoral or covetous or an idolater or a reviler or a drunkard or an extortioner, not even to eat with such a person. So if you're worshiping an idol, which today we see idols of Jesus all over the world, you can't even eat with that person if you're a Christian. Even if he calls himself a Christian, because it says anyone named a brother, right? Psalm 16:4. Their sorrow shall be multiplied who hasten after another God. I just showed in John 20:28, Thomas called Jesus God. Their drink offerings of blood will I not offer. Jesus says to drink his blood in remembrance of him, right? Not physically, but symbolically. But it's a drink offering of blood. Nor take up their names on my lips. Jesus said to get baptized in his name and to call upon his name, and anything you ask, he will do it. John 14:14. 1 Corinthians 11:25. In the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. John 14:14. Anything you ask in my name, I will do it. This is exactly what Psalm 16:4 tells you not to do. Clearly. This liberty of yours. What is this liberty of yours? Let's get into it. 1 Corinthians 8:1. Now about food sacrificed to idols. Remember, the disciples decreed, don't eat meat that was sacrificed to idols. So Paul says in 1 Corinthians 8:1, now about food sacrificed to idols, we know that we all possess knowledge, but knowledge puffs up while love builds up. So what this chapter is basically speaking about is, if you know the gospel and you still are found eating in temples of idolatry and somebody sees you, that's going to give them the mindset that, well, shoot, if I see Paul eating in the temple with idols, it must not be nothing wrong with it. But the problem is they don't know that in Paul's mind, he doesn't see a problem with it because he knows that this idol really doesn't exist and it's just an image, but yet he's still in there. Well, the problem is that is if you're supposed to be a Christian and have high moral values and not sexually immoral and things like that, and I see you in a strip club or in a brothel or something, what are you doing in there in the first place? Oh, these prostitutes really don't mean that to me. That's what they're basically saying. If you're in the temple of an idol and you're eating food sacrificed to the idol, oh, this idol really doesn't mean nothing to me. But why are you here in the first place? 1 Corinthians 8 and 12. 1 Corinthians 8 through 12. But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours, that's not a liberty that is foolishness, first of all, to be in the temple of an idol to begin with. But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. So it's saying, even though you have knowledge, it gives you the liberty to go inside an idol's temple and eat, right? Verse 10, for if anyone sees you have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? Well, of course. If you're the top pastor and I see you in the prostitution house, that's going to say, well, shoot, if the pastor was in there, what's wrong with me being in there, right? But the pastor's excuse is, oh, I have knowledge. I know that these things really don't mean nothing. No, that's not what that's representing. That means you in there indulging, right? Verse 11, and because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. You shouldn't be in there in the first place. So it's really not a liberty. You practice what you preach. So if you in the brothel and people see you, they gonna think it's fine to go into the brothel. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. So by Paul saying this liberty of yours, that's not a liberty. It's actually an influence. And you're influencing people to go into idolatry and eat things sacrificed to idols. But Paul earlier said you shouldn't even eat with such a person. To teach and seduce my servants to commit sexual immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols. Now, what's interesting about this is we know sexual immorality is likened to, things like adultery and fornication. Well, in the Tanakh, adultery is also likened to idolatry because it's like you're cheating on the Most High with another God. So Revelations 2 and 14 says, but I have a few things against you because there are those who hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel to eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit sexual immorality. Well, again, we see eating things sacrificed to idols. Well, eating that bread, that communion, and drinking that blood symbolically is a sacrifice to an idol. And most churches, not all, but a lot of churches have idols of Jesus that they're doing this to while they're eating that bread and drinking that symbolic blood, which is sacrificed to an idol. Revelation 2 and 20, nevertheless, I have a few things against you because you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit sexual immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols. Now, Jezebel was way back in the times of the kings. So unless there's like a cult or something that, still subscribes to Jezebel, because, she brought in idolatry into Israel. But it says that you basically teach my servants to commit sexual immorality, which also can be considered idolatry, and eat things sacrificed to idols, which is definitely idolatry. So we have Paul giving a pass to people who commit idolatry or eat things sacrificed to idols, and only because he feels that, well, they have knowledge and they know an idol really is nothing, they can still cause a stumbling block to others. No, in reality, if somebody see you in the strip club, they know what you're there for. You can't say, oh, well, this don't really mean that to me. So if somebody see you in a temple of an idol eating food, of course that's going to influence them to do what you do if they look up to you. So that wouldn't even make any sense. So we see the New Testament is pretty much teaching against itself, talking about eating things sacrificed to idols, but the whole communion process is something sacrificed to an idol. which would be Jesus. One of them invites you and you eat of his sacrifice. Exodus 34:13 through 16. But you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, and cut down their wooden images. What are the wooden images today? We know what they are. For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they play the harlot with their gods. There goes that sexual immorality that is likened to adultery, which is idolatry. And they play the harlot with their gods and make a sacrifice to their gods, and one of them invites you and you eat of his sacrifice. This will be the communion or the new covenant, according to Jesus' testimony that this is the blood of the new covenant. Eat this bread and drink this wine, right? And you take of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their gods, and make your sons play the harlot with their gods. So basically, we already know way back from the book of Exodus that don't eat with people who sacrifice things to their gods. And most people say their grace over their food in the name of Jesus, which is the name of another God, John 20:28. And if it's on the holiday of Passover, they have turned that Passover Seder into a holiday in remembrance of Jesus, like it says in the book of Corinthians. They invited the people to their sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate. Numbers 25:1 through 3. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. No wonder that the Most High basically had the temple destroyed, even though it was prophesied to be destroyed anyway. This would be another reason that the anger of the Most High was aroused, because Israel started partaking in this new doctrine of a feast that was dedicated to Jesus in remembrance of him, instead of the exodus of Egypt. Acts 21:25. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, and from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. So again, we see the disciples that wrote the decree: don't eat things offered to idols, blood, which Jesus says to drink symbolically. And he even says in Matthew 5:28, when you commit sins in your mind and your heart, it's as if you already did them. Things strangled, and from sexual immorality. So we see that eating things sacrificed to idols is a big, big problem. All things are lawful for me. Well, remember, Paul said in Romans 2:13, it's not the hearers of the law, but the doers of the law who are righteous. So I don't know how all things can be lawful for him. Well, he did say that, we're not under law, but under grace. But why would you say the doers of the law if you're not under the law, right? So Romans 2:13 and Romans, concerning the verse where it says you're not under the law, but under grace, they don't match. Because in Isaiah 26, verse 9 and 10, it tells you if grace is given to the wicked, he won't learn righteousness. So these things just don't add up. 1 Corinthians 10:23 through 33. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. Eat whatever is sold in the market, asking no questions for conscience sake. Well, we read the disciples decreed for the Gentiles, they are not to eat nothing strangled. So that means that meat is strangled and it's sold in the market, and you don't ask questions, you could be going against what the disciples said. Paul saying, well, just don't ask, then you won't know, right? Well, that's a problem. Verse 26. For the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. 27. If any of those who do not believe invite you to dinner and you desire to go, eat whatever is set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake. First of all, chances are you're not going to eat with somebody who doesn't believe, because chances are they're probably going to serve you something that was offered to an idol. And when you say grace over your food, if you say that out loud, you're probably going to come into conflict, because you're probably going to be praying in the name of Jesus, and he's probably going to be saying his grace in the name of his God or whoever he's giving thanks to. So that's going to be an uncomfortable situation right there. So he's saying, if any of those who do not believe invite you to dinner and you desire to go, eat whatever is set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake. So again, you could be possibly eating something that was offered to an idol, but you just didn't ask no questions. But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it for the sake of the one who told you and for conscience sake. So if somebody tells you this food was blessed in the name of Jesus, you can't eat it because Jesus is an idol, right? He's the image of wood today. People got him in their house, around their neck, statues all over the church. He said, drink his blood, eat his flesh. Even that be symbolically, the Tanakh never says to do that concerning no man. So this, if they say to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it for the one who told you for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's in all its fullness. So Paul's trying to bring in some Tanakh verses to justify his position. We know the Lord created the earth in all its fullness and it belongs to him. But that has nothing to do with not asking if something is legal for you to eat or not. Verse 29, conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? But if I partake with thanks, why am I evil spoken of for the food over which I give thanks? So is he saying that if I give thanks over it, that it's still kosher? That doesn't sound right. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. You can't eat something offered to an idol to the glory of God. Give no offense either to the Jews or to the Greeks or to the church of God. Give no offense, that means don't rebuke nobody. Don't ask no questions, because that's going to offend them. That doesn't sound right either, because we know rebuke is heavy in the Tanakh. Verse 33, just as I also please all men in all things. That's crucial. Just as I also please all men in all things, you can't please everybody. Not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. You can't save nobody by ignoring what they do and not checking them. Now, if it's a non-believer, then you're probably not going to be able to save that person anyway, unless you're able to talk with him and reason with him. But if you're not asking questions and you just letting them serve you whatever, then the conversation is never even going to come up in the first place. But again, for Paul, all things are lawful for him. So that's how he gets down. For I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it. Now, this is basically telling you out of Paul's own mouth, even though we see that he was supposedly a student of Gamaliel, raised in the Tanakh, right? According to the perfect teachings of the law, is what he says. It says he was even righteous in the law in Philippians. Galatians 1:11-12. But I make known to you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached by me is not according to man. For I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it. So whatever Gamaliel taught him was not these gospels that he's talking about. But it came through the revelation of Jesus Christ. Well, if Jesus said you got to listen to the scribes and the Pharisees, then you would have to refer back to what Gamaliel taught. Matthew 23:1-3. Then Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, now, and those multitudes could have been anybody, right? And to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Meaning, the scribes and the Pharisees have the authority of Moses. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not. So he's basically saying, do what they say, not as they do, because he's trying to say some of them are wicked, which could be very true. There's wicked people in every sect, every generation. There were some false prophets in the time of the Tanakh, false prophets in the New Testament. So that's understandable. But what about Gamaliel? Acts 5:34. Then there stood up one in the council. Now that council is the Sanhedrin. A Pharisee named Gamaliel, a doctor of the law, held in high repute among all the people. Now, this word high repute is like saying he was precious. He was special among the people. Everybody liked him. Look it up. So in the Helps Word Studies, 3547 in the Strongs, it says nomo didas kalos, or kalos, from 3551. Nomos, which is law, and 1320, didas kalos, which is teacher of the law, properly a teacher of the law, referring to an expert in the Mosaic law, not the Gospels. This person was so highly learned, scholarly in the Hebrew scriptures, they had the status of teaching jurist, i.e. a premier teacher of the law who gave expert theological opinion on issues in Jewish life and religion. So Gamaliel was a heavyweight and a Pharisee, whom Paul supposedly, we're told, studied at his feet. But right here in Galatians, Paul tells you, I didn't get this gospel from him. Nope. I wasn't taught this. Jesus told me everything. So that means we got to put everything Paul said that's bogus at the feet of Jesus. So is Jesus telling people, well, if you're going to eat something, don't ask no questions? Or is he going to say, keep the commandments, like the guy asked him in Luke 10:25 through 28, what must I do for eternal life? He said, the commandments? The man said, yeah, I've been doing them. He said, do this, right? So are you keeping the commandments or are you not? Are you listening to Paul, who says he's getting this from Jesus? Or are you listening to Jesus, who said, listen to the Pharisees? And the Pharisees is going to tell you to keep the Torah. So you got some decisions to make. Take them and be purified with them. Now, as much as Paul tells you you're not under the law, you're under grace. We seen earlier he talking about rebuke people, but then he say don't offend nobody, right? Paul gets checked in front of everybody and don't mention nothing that he supposedly learned from Jesus, like he says in Galatians 1:12. Acts 21:19 through 26. And when he had greeted them, he told in detail those things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord, and they said to him, you see, brother, how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. But they have been informed about you, that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then? The assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. This is the vow of a Nazarite. Take them and be purified with them. Now, I thought Jesus already purified everybody with his blood, right? That's what the New Testament teaches. So why is James talking to other believers saying that they need to be purified and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads? Read Numbers chapter 6 if you want to know exactly all the details of this. And they all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the law. Now remember, Paul says all things are lawful for me. I can do what I want. I'm not under law. I'm under grace. That's not what he tells James. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. Then Paul took the man, and on the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. An offering made for each one of them. I thought Jesus was the last sacrifice. What's going on? Why do they have to be purified if Jesus purified them with his blood? Why do they have to announce the days of purification at a time which an offering got to be made for each of them? And when you take the vow of a Nazarene, you have to give a sin sacrifice. How come Paul didn't say, look, elders and everybody here, I don't have to do none of this. I'm not under this law anymore. I don't have to do none of this. Jesus told me different. He appeared to me and told me different. That's not what happened. Take them and be purified with them. That contradicts everything Paul be talking about in his letters. Purified in the temple. Now, this again is just more proof of, obviously, Paul didn't feel so purified by the blood of Jesus. Acts 24:17-18. Now, after many years have gone by since Jesus has died or been executed, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation. Offerings, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with tumult. So that means after many years, after he had to get purified when he dealt with the elders in Acts 21, they found him years later being purified in the temple. Now, how do you get purified in the temple? He was bringing his offerings, right? Acts 15:9. And made no distinction between us and them, purifying their hearts by faith. Who got their hearts purified by faith? If Paul's in the temple getting purified, and in Acts 21 taking offerings and sacrifices to get purified. Hebrews 1:3. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven. If he provided purification for sins, why is Paul getting purified in the temple? And why in Acts 21 is him and 4 other people have to go get purified and they were believers? Doesn't add up. It does not add up. Rebuke. So you're supposed to be rebuking people who are calling on the names of other gods, who are eating meat sacrificed to other gods. Titus 1:13. This witness is true, therefore rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in faith. And this is not specifically talking about rebuking people for worshiping idols, but you're still supposed to rebuke, and it says rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in faith. So basically, according to the New Testament, if somebody's out of line, you're supposed to check them. Instead of saying how Paul's saying earlier, oh, don't cause offense to people. You're going to hurt their feelings, right? Don't offend people. Titus 2:15. These things speak and exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no man despise thee. Rebuke with all authority. So you're supposed to be checking people. 2 Timothy 4:2. Preach the word, be instant in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. So just like James checked Paul in front of everybody, read Acts 21, you're supposed to be checking people who are eating things sacrificed to idols and worshiping idols, which would be the statues and the crosses that they have in their houses and in their churches and around their necks, right? Where's the rebuke at? Instead of saying, oh, don't hurt nobody's feelings, he might have a weak conscience, no. So the New Testament actually teaches against its own doctrine. They worship, the Christians that do worship Jesus as God. The other Christians, some do rebuke them, but the Christians themselves that do worship Jesus don't realize they themselves are caught up in idolatry. Rebuke. Leviticus 19:17. You must not harbor hatred against your brother. Rebuke your neighbor directly, and you will not incur guilt because of him. 1 Timothy 5:20. Those who sin rebuke before all, that others also may fear. This is exactly what James did to Paul when he checked Paul, saying, you telling everybody not to keep the law of Moses, you're going to go to the temple and you're going to give sacrifices, and everybody's going to know that you keep the law. Because we know Paul in all his letters, he says, I just read it earlier, all things are lawful for me. He says in Romans, you're not under the law, you're under grace, right? All these things, no. James checked him and rebuked him in front of everybody, the elders and everything. Paul didn't even rebut it. Paul just did what he was supposed to do and didn't say nothing about, well, Jesus came to me and we ain't supposed to do that no more. Jesus died for me, so I don't have to keep no laws. I don't have to get purified as a Nazarene. Jesus' blood purified me. He didn't give none of that speech, right? He did exactly what James told him to do in front of everybody. Because if anything, Paul should have rebuked James. Like, look, Jesus came to me, right? Proverbs 9:8. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. So if you in the right and you rebuke somebody who is wise, they're going to love you for it. If you rebuke a fool, of course he's going to hate you. You know, a fool does not want to be checked at all, no matter what he's doing. Proverbs 27:5. Open rebuke is better than secret love. So since Paul earlier said you're not even supposed to eat with idolaters, then turn around and say, well, just don't ask what they did with the meat. Did they offer it to an idol? Just don't ask them. No, you're supposed to rebuke them and say, hey, man, what happened? What's up with this meat? And if they tell you, oh, yeah, we offered it to an idol, he says, then don't eat it. But no, if they're not a believer, you shouldn't be eating with them anyway, right? Why would you be eating with somebody who's an idolater? Now, if you're trying to teach them some Torah, you're going to have to rebuke them. Go and read Proverbs 6:23. You got to, the Torah is a light, or the commandment is a lamp, the Torah is a light, and reproof is the way of life. You got to tell people, hey, man, you probably want to look into this because this ain't the way to go. So rebuke, reprove, all these different things are different ways of how to communicate with people and teach them the truth. Let's continue with this rebuke, right? Proverbs 28:23. He that rebuketh a man shall afterwards find more favor than he that flattered with his tongue. Stop trying to make people feel good. Now, that's not saying that you should just dog people out. There is a way to do it and a time and a place to do it, but you still have to rebuke somebody when you're trying to get them on the right path. Amos 5:10. They hate him that rebuketh in the gate, and they abhor him that speaketh uprightly. Galatians 2:11. Now when Peter had come to Antioch, God withstood him to his face because he was to be blamed. Like I said earlier, Paul had no problem telling you, yeah, I had to go and check Peter because he thought Peter was out of line. But then that means you also got to check people who's out of line with this, in the temple. You know what I mean? Hey, man, what you doing in that temple eating with them idols? I don't care how much knowledge you got. You shouldn't even be in there in the first place. Doesn't matter how you feel about it. Oh, this idol don't mean nothing to me. I can do no. You ain't even supposed to be in there, because you're going to influence people to be in them, eating in them temples, sacrificing that food to them idols. So they need to be rebuked instead of saying don't offend nobody's conscience, or however you want to look at that. If that's being mean, or you got to come to people in their level. If you're trying to save somebody's soul, you just got to give them the truth and see how they take it. And of course, there's a way to do it. You don't have to be rude about it, but you can definitely sit down and chop it up with them and see what's going on with them. Fear them not. You're not supposed to be afraid to tell somebody what's going on. Ezekiel 2:4-6. For they are imprudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, thus said the Lord God, and they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet shall know that there have been a prophet among them. And thou, son of man, be not afraid of them, neither be afraid of their words, their briars and thorns be with thee. And thou dost dwell among scorpions. Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. So if you got to check somebody, don't be afraid of them. Now, of course, this is a prophet coming to some pretty rebellious people when you read Ezekiel. Ezekiel 3:9. As an adamant harder than flint, I have made thy forehead. Fear them not, neither be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. Jeremiah 1:17. Jeremiah, get ready. Go and tell the people what I command you to do. What I command you to say. Don't be frightened by them, or I will make you terrified while they watch. So the Most High is telling Jeremiah, if you scared of them, they're going to see you scared of me. So fear them not. Do not preach against the house of Isaac. Ezekiel 44:23. They shall teach my people the difference between the holy and profane, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. So this is what a righteous person is supposed to do. Say, this is cool, this ain't cool. Doesn't matter how people feel about it. That's just your job. It says it. And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and profane, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. Amos 7:16. Now therefore hear the word of the Lord. You say, do not prophesy against Israel. Do not preach against the house of Isaac. So people were complaining. Don't tell us the truth. Don't be telling us we're doing nothing wrong. Don't give no prophecies. We don't want to hear it, right? Well, guess what? You're going to hear it. Like I read earlier, Ezekiel was told, and Jeremiah was told, yeah, they're going to have some hard foreheads, but guess what? You about to go and drop bombs on them to let them know what time it is. Speak unto us smooth things. Isaiah 38:11. Now go, write it before them in a table, and note it in a book, that it may be for the time to come forever and ever, that this is a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord, which say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits, get you out of the way, turn aside out of the path, cause the Holy One of Israel to cease from before us. We don't want to hear it. We want those smooth things. Don't be trying to check us, right? We're not trying to hear it. No. Write it down. Put it in a book so they'll know y'all out of bounds. This is what the prophets are supposed to do. This is exactly why the New Testament, I'm not going to say the whole New Testament. I'm going to say Paul specifically trying to please everybody. To the Jew, I became the Jew. To the Gentile, to this, to that. Basically, Paul was saying, whatever you was, I'm trying to come there and you can be that. That's called a hypocrite. If you was an Israelite, you had an obligation to be an Israelite and an obligation to keep the law of Moses. And if you really was a follower of Jesus, if you're going by what Jesus said, when he said you have to keep the law, when he says you have to listen to the scribes and the Pharisees in Matthew 23, what did the Pharisees teach? What did Gamaliel teach? It says he was a doctor of the law, which was the law of Moses, not the Gospels, not the smooth things, but the rebuke and the way of life found in Proverbs 6:23. Speak each man the truth to his neighbor. Zechariah 8:16. These are the things you shall do. Speak each man the truth to his neighbor. Give judgment in your gates for truth, justice, and peace. That word judgment means you got to make some decisions. You got to hurt some feelings. You got to do some rebuking. The truth hurts. It says, you got to speak the truth. It doesn't say, oh, don't give no offense. Don't offend nobody. Don't ask them if they sacrificing things to idols. No, you got to ask them what's up. Proverbs 12:17. He who speaks the truth declares righteousness, but a false witness deceit. So are you speaking deceit or are you speaking the truth? Yeah, you might lose some friends. You might get some family members that don't talk to you no more. But you got to speak that truth. Truth hurts. We know that. Facts are offensive. Who may dwell in your holy hill? Those who don't offend nobody by speaking the truth, or what Psalm 15 tells us. Let's read Psalm 15, 1-5. A Psalm of David. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? He who walks uprightly and works righteousness, not just believes, but works righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart. He who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord. He who swears to his own hurt and does not change, he who does not put out his money at usury, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent, he who does these things shall never be moved. But he works righteousness and speaks the truth. That's how you abide in the tabernacle of the Most High. That's how you dwell in the holy hill of the Most High. The truth. Your law is truth. Jeremiah 4:2. And you shall swear the Lord lives in truth and judgment and in righteousness. The nations shall bless themselves in him, and in him they shall glory. The Lord lives in truth, in judgment, and in righteousness. Judgment requires some tough calls. Psalm 119, 142. Your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and your law is truth. Your Torah is true. It doesn't say the Gospels. It said your law is truth. Daniel 9:13. As it is written in the law of Moses. As it is written in the law of Moses, not the gospel, all this disaster has come upon us, yet we have not made our prayer before the Lord our God, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand your truth, your law, your Torah. Malachi 2:6. The law of truth was in his mouth. The law, what is that? The Torah of truth was in his mouth, and justice was not found on his lips. And injustice was not found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity and turned many away from iniquity. This is concerning the priests, right? Now we know the priests went off the path. That's why, same book of Malachi, when you read Malachi 3, the priests have to be purified so they can start offering sacrifices again, which will basically negate the whole point of Jesus came to die for your sins if the priests are going to be purified to offer sacrifices again anyway. So again, the law is truth. You have to speak the truth to the people, Jew or Gentile. In his law, he meditates day and night. Psalm 1:1-3. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. Whatever he does shall prosper. It says, nor stands in the path of sinners. So if I'm dealing with somebody who's not a believer, then chances are they're probably making sins unaware, not intentionally, but out of ignorance. But if I'm not to offend nobody, then that means I can't check them, which means I'm not speaking the truth when I talk to them. Well, that's not the law of the Most High. It says if you rebuke a wise man, he will love you for that. You can change a person's life. You rebuke a fool, he's going to hate you for it. Well, guess what? He's a fool for hating you and not accepting correction. Because that's a blessing in itself, he who accepts the correction of the Most High. Read Job chapter 5. Trust in men is a huge, huge problem. So you don't have to be a Christian or an Israelite, according to the Tanakh, to have a relationship with the Most High. The New Testament teaches different on this matter, of course, right? Matthew 19:17. So he said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. Simply keep the commandments. Luke 10:25-28. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? He doesn't say, what have I been teaching in the Gospels? What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live. Then, John 6:53, then Jesus said to him, most assuredly I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. That's not what Matthew 19:17 says, and that's not what Luke 10:25-28 says. We got two separate occasions when people are asking, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And nothing about blood and drinking his blood and eating his flesh. Then comes the book of John, completely changes that. Because John is centered completely around a new doctrine of this blood doctrine and Jesus being God, and John goes a whole nother direction than the other gospels go. But for a Gentile, keeping the commandments to them will be the laws of Noah. In Luke 10:25-28, the lawyer, what I would assume being a lawyer in Israel, was probably a lawyer of the Torah, and this would definitely be concerning the Tanakh. So whether you be a Jew or a Gentile, you still have a Torah and you still have commandments, like I showed earlier in this lesson. So the Gentiles can keep the commandments and live. The Jew can definitely keep the commandments and live. We know that there's resurrection in Daniel chapter 12, Isaiah 26. There's definitely blessings to the Gentiles, definitely redemption and salvation to the Gentiles, and has nothing to do with eating the flesh of the Son of Man or drinking his blood. Do not trust men. Psalm 146:3. Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no salvation. That is a huge statement. Psalm 34:8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that shall trust in him. Didn't Jesus say he ain't good, only God is good? That would mean he ain't God, right? Jeremiah 17:5. Thus hath the Lord said, cursed be the man that trusts in man and makes flesh his arm, and whose heart departs from the Lord. People are giving their heart to Jesus and departing from the Most High. They're following Paul and his new doctrine that he said he got from Jesus and not the Torah. Put not your trust in princes. Jesus is called a prince. Nor in the Son of Man. Jesus is called the Son of Man, in whom there is no salvation. So even if his name is Yeshua, he don't have no salvation. Read 2 Samuel 22. Read the whole chapter, and David says salvation is given to kings. Salvation is given to kings. So even though David did save somebody, read 1 Samuel 23:5. David was a savior, but that salvation was given to him. He don't have it. Or this right here in the Psalms, it wouldn't say, put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no salvation. Because David is called a prince. David was a son of Adam. And David didn't have salvation. He was given the salvation, even though David did partake in the role of a savior to his people. He saved Israel out of many battles and gave them rest on every side, to why Solomon had a peaceful kingdom until he did what he did to get it broken up. Do not trust men, definitely no Son of Man, in whom there is no salvation. Conclusion. Gentiles can be perfect, upright, righteous, rich, saviors, kings, queens, wise, cleansed, saved, redeemed, forgiven, restored, and blessed. They have a Torah, they have mitzvot, they have a covenant, they came from far because of the name of the Most High. Don't let anybody tell you any different, since you know what the truth is on these matters. 1 Kings 4:34. And there came from all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon, from all kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. Now, what was Solomon telling people? Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Why is the fear of God so important? Psalm 145:19. He will fulfill the desire of them that fear him. He also will hear their cry and save them.